damn it.
She would become the sole recipient of Shelley's abuse for quite a bit of time.
Yeah, because Dad's not there and all the kids are gone and even Kathy's gone.
Right. Shelley would torture her in ways that she had never done to anybody else. It was more mental and verbal than physical.
Yeah, because it never recedes. It's always more.
Right.
Like they find new ways.
Exactly. Yeah. And she would say that she never was really, like, the same punishment was not administered twice. She would just find new ways to do shit. And pretty early on, Tori learned that if she told anybody, the abuse would get worse. So at one point, she had told a friend's mom that she had been beaten. And the mom actually confronted Shelley. And Shelley, in turn, beat the living shit out of her, even worse.
Which is crazy because I don't even know how her mom let her have friends. If she was that controlling.
Like,
you know what I mean?
Well, Nikki didn't have friends. Nikki was very isolated. Sammy, because when Nikki and Shane were there, Sammy was allowed to have life. For a little bit, Tori was allowed to have somewhat of a life. And nothing got better, though. Nothing. So in 1999, Shelley brings home her third victim, Ron Woodworth. And just as Kathy, Ron was down on his luck and he needed a place to stay. And he recently had broken up with his long-term boyfriend, lost his job, and he was at a low point in his life.
Yeah.
They had met through Shelley's job. She finally managed to get a job. Who the fuck hired her she worked for Olympic Area Agency on Aging. She worked with elderly people as a caseworker. When she was an abusive person, she was investigating into abuse of elderly people.
Wow.
Yeah. So Ron was easy prey for her. She had this down. So the verbal abuse was quick to start. Tori said within 2 weeks, the verbal abuse started. She would call him a fag, tell him how disgusting he was. And she pretty much picked right up where things came to an end for Kathy. She began drugging him, limiting his food. He would be beaten. His clothes were taken away. He had started out in a bedroom, but then the bed was taken away. He was eventually he would sleep on the floor in the computer room under the desk. He lost bathroom privileges, and he was made to do yard work from dawn to dusk. She would demand that he jump off of high places over and over again. This is a man who's in his 50s, and he would jump off the roof. Dave was there, saw him do it. And Shelley would say, go do it again.
What the fuck?
And he would say, please stop. Like, please, I don't want to. And she would say, you're disgusting. I won't have you being a fag in my house. Go do this again. It's unreal where her mind was at this point. I don't understand. So again, he's made to do these things until he's bruised and bloody. At one point, he had the bottom of his feet were so wounded that to help him and to help him heal, she ended up pouring bleach from a bottle and spraying him down with cold water and then dunking his feet in boiled hot water afterwards.
Are you fucking kidding me?
No, I'm not. So he couldn't walk. She would wrap his feet in these gauze bandages, but every time she did it, essentially she was boiling off his skin.
Yeah.
During the abuse, Shelley made sure that Ron was cut off from his family and friends. She obviously was the master of playing sweet and caring and lying about any and everything. So his family had no idea of what was going on. And she was actually an instigator in like a family feud between him and his mother. He ended up not having any contact with his mom or his other family members for the rest of his life over this. But she did. She remained in contact with them and said, I'm trying to help him. I'm trying to get him into a better place. And I know that he misses you guys, but he's trying to get a job and he's trying to do better. And, you know, I'm sorry that he's doing this. But then she would make him write these horrible letters saying mean things to his mom and his brother and send them. And then she would call his family and, you know, say, I know he sent you that, but don't be don't be mad at him. It was just complete bullshit.
How manipulative is this bitch?
Completely.
Wow.
Ron ended up with nothing and nowhere to go. He did everything that Shelley told him to do. And when Nikki learned that there was a possibility of history repeating itself with another person in the house for Shelley to abuse, she got in contact with Sammy. And Sammy just didn't want to, she didn't want to think that her mom would do it again. So she was like, no, he's fine. I just saw him. He's fine. And she just didn't want to believe it. But then she realized when there was a mention, Shelley said, well, he keeps losing his shoes. He has no shoes. And Sammy was like, Mom, what are you doing?
Yeah.
He's fine. I'm helping him get better. She knew. Tori,
nobody gets better with your care.
No. Tori was also concerned, but she was just kind of too young to know. She didn't know what happened to Kathy. Kathy was murdered when Tori was just a little girl. Yeah. She was just a baby and young toddler aged when that happened.
She didn't know.
She had no idea. So she didn't realize that this wasn't the first time that Shelley had done this.
Yeah, no, the girls knew. The older girls knew.
Yeah. Tori also didn't realize that because both of the older girls were out of the house, that her abuse was not singular. Her mom made it sound like Nikki was a demon child and that Nikki had beat Shelley.
Of course.
And hit her.
She controls the narrative.
Right. And then she said Sammy just abandoned her. But she made it sound like their childhood was just plain and nothing ever happened. Yeah. And that for some reason, Tori was the only one who was, on the receiving end of this abuse, which she has no way of proving. She has no way of proving at all. No. Up until that point, Nikki didn't have any contact with Shelley or any of the family other than her grandmother and Sammy secretly. So Tori was being fed all these lies. She had no idea. Nikki decides to make a report to the sheriff's department, and she tells them everything about Kathy. She had suspected that something had happened to him. Yeah. But again, it was so painful. They didn't want to acknowledge it. Yeah. And there was no proof that anything happened to him. So Pacific County sheriffs claimed they were investigating the matter, but that their hands were tied without proof. I honestly just don't think that they had any idea of how to handle the situation or an investigation. Or
believe it, because you're telling me I can't even believe this, and just like the depths that it goes.
Right. Unfortunately, this is a small town, and I'm sure this is not maybe the first time this has happened, but maybe the first time that some of these officers had ever heard of this type of thing. And they just didn't know what to do. But they began to feel pressure from outside areas to get some answers for Kathy. Where the hell was she? Her family wanted to know. Yeah. They filed a missing persons report. And then another matter would occur. There is a possibility of another victim named James McClintock. He went by Mac. Yeah. He was an elderly man that was actually a friend of Kathy's mom. Somehow Shelley and Ron began taking care of him. And Shelley weaseled her way in and managed to get power of attorney and was left, she was going to be left a little bit of money when he passed away, like $5,000. And she would get his home after he and his dog passed away. So the dog got it first. His dog, Sissy, was a black lab. She was to inherit first. So he has an accident while Ron is taking care of him in 2002. An accident.
Quote unquote accident.
And he dies, leaving the dog in his estate in Shelley's hands. The sheriff don't suspect foul play because Mac was elderly and he had previously fallen and been injured. Yeah. And again, there's no proof. He fell out of his wheelchair and he dies. But in the end, Shelley lies about the dog being hit by a car and assumes control of the house and any money that Mac had, while Ron is just deteriorating before everybody. Sammy is in denial that it's happening. Tori is nothing but worried. Dave is never around, and Nikki knows nothing good is going to come from her. But her statement has led to no action. So this is, months later that Nikki gave a statement. Nothing's happened. Wow. Shelley keeps saying they will sell Mac's house. They're going to sell the house. They're going to use the money to move to Gig Harbor so that they can all be a family again and live the good life that they were meant to live. So the sheriff starts to come around and question Shelley about Kathy. And her family never gave up on trying to, find her. And the story about the boyfriend truck driver doesn't sit well with them. It doesn't fit what she would do. Yeah. They also start to question whether Shelley had a right to Mac's estate. They're not sure that she really should have gotten it. So in 2002, a panicked Shelley calls Dave in the middle of the night. Ron was dead. He was dead from the months of abuse at her hands, and that she needed Dave to come home and clean up the mess again. And this dumb asshole comes and rescues her again.
Jesus.
He's still not seeing how destructive she is, still not believing that she did it on purpose, that this was abuse. He buries Ron's body in the backyard the best that he can, and he waits for a burn ban to be lifted so that he can dispose of the body in the way that he did Kathy and Shane.
Unbelievable.
So they get Tori out of the house so that they can do that by sending her to stay with Sammy in Tacoma, not realizing that this is pretty much what starts the downward spiral of their lives. While Tori has been fed lie after lie about how Nikki was horrible and was abusive and had no contact with her, Sammy knows better. And Sammy had kept a secret from her mom that she and Nikki were in constant contact. Sammy plans for them to meet up, for the sisters to all meet after years of being apart.
Yeah.
Nikki had left when she was 6. She was 14 when they would meet up again. It's heartwarming and heartbreaking at the same time because Sammy and Nikki learned that Tori is being abused just like they were.
Of course.
And it's just kind of the final straw. They know they need to do something, but when Nikki has tried to speak with authorities, nothing happened. They asked Tori, can she hold on just a little bit longer so that they could get a game plan together? And she's begrudgingly, she's like, yeah, okay. They're thinking, okay, she's got 4 more years. Can she last until she's 18? Yeah. And then we can take her. That's not the case at all. When Tori gets home, she's told Ron is gone and that he got a job and left, and she knows it's a lie. Her sisters had told her everything about Kathy.
Yeah.
And they expected that this was going to be the case. And they told her, if mom tells you that Ron's gone, don't believe it. He's dead.
Yeah.
And it broke her heart because she really loved Ron. And it was sad for her. It was the same type of thing. She knew that when Ron was there, she wouldn't get abused, but she just didn't want to see him go through that.
Yeah.
So Tori calls Sammy, who in turn calls Nikki that the shit got bad and Ron's dead. Nikki again goes to the Pacific County Sheriff's with this information. This time it works. CPS shows up the next morning, removes Tori from the house, while Shelley just looks on in disbelief. She just can't fucking believe it. She keeps saying she doesn't understand why. What could she have done? She doesn't know what's going on, and nothing has ever happened. Nothing bad's ever happened. She's never even ground Tori for anything. Of course, it's all bullshit.
Yeah.
She calls Dave. She tells him to come home. Of course.
She needs him to fix things again.
Right. Well, he fixes things. He shows up the next day and he decides to go down and get information on Tori because they've taken her away and they're not telling Shelley anything. He wants his daughter.
Yeah.
What he ends up doing is breaking down while the police are talking to him, while the sheriffs are talking to him, and he spills out the entire story of Kathy, Shane, and Ron.
About fucking time.
That is the only thing that he ever did right. So the news of the story begins to circulate, and the girls are forced to relive every moment of their torture and abuse. Every time they see their mom's face on the news, it's everywhere. But it's done. Tori's out of the house. She's safe. Sammy, in a couple of weeks after that incident where they take her, gets custody of her. So she's with Sammy. Nikki and Sammy finally have answers as to Shane's disappearance. And justice for Dave's and Shelley's crimes is finally going to happen.
Good.
So Shelley and Dave Notek were arrested and held on multiple $1 million bonds in connections with the deaths of Kathy Loreno, Shane Watson, and Ron Woodworth. In February of 2004, Dave pled guilty to unlawful disposal of human remains and second-degree murder of Shane Watson. The story comes out that Shane was out in the pole shed and Shelley had said, take care of him. And he shot him in the back of the head with a shotgun.
Jesus.
He was sentenced and served 15 years in prison and was released on parole in 2016. It's not enough. It's not enough. That is unreal that that's what he got. That's it.
I'm speechless. Holy shit.
He served 15 years in prison.
Okay.
Yeah. So even after her arrest, Shelley Notek is still trying to control things. And even at this point, she entered something named an Alfred plea in response to her charges. So basically, in this type of plea, you acknowledge that there is enough evidence against you that a jury would likely convict you.
Yeah.
And that you probably would be found guilty. but you're not actually denying or admitting to the crime. You're only admitting that the jury would likely find you guilty.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, investigators knew that they had little to no evidence to prove their case of first-degree murder. They had no body for Kathy. They had no remains. They had nothing.